Alright, today I'm creating this video to go over the examples that I sent out. Again, try not to make this video too long, so if I'm going too fast, make sure you pause the video. If you got questions, make sure you email me those right away. Or get on Zoom and ask those questions so I can help you out. The two examples that I sent out, most of you that sent problems back did not have asymptotes in it. All of your answers should have asymptotes. If you do not have an asymptote in your graph, you did this completely wrong. All right, so let's talk about the first example. So x plus 2 over x minus 2. So the first thing that you need to do in that was find a domain. To find a domain, all you do is set your denominator equal to 0. So I'm going to take x minus 2 and set it equal to 0. To get x by itself, I would add 2 to the opposite side, which tells me x is equal to 2. Remember, when you find your domain, we say that x cannot equal 2. So my domain is x cannot equal 2. The way that you find your domain is the same way that you find your vertical asymptote. So your vertical asymptote is at positive 2. So I got my vertical asymptote the same way I found my domain. Next step is to find your horizontal asymptote. In your email, I sent you a bunch of rules to be able to figure out how to find your horizontal asymptote. In this problem, my degree is the same for my numerator and denominator, which means we will look at the coefficients. The coefficients, anything in front of a variable that is no number, would just be 1. So the horizontal asymptote would be 1 over 1, which is equal to 1. Again, got my coefficients from the numbers in front of x, which would be 1. So my horizontal asymptote is at 1, my vertical asymptote is at 2, and I already found my domain. So the three things that we need to do are already found. The last step is to graph this out. So I wish I had more colors in the marker so I can show the asymptotes in different colors. But since I am at home, I do not have that. So the first thing that you do with your graph, you draw out your asymptotes. Remember, your asymptotes are dashed lines. My vertical asymptote was at positive 2. So I got a vertical asymptote that goes through positive 2. My horizontal asymptote was at positive 1. So at positive 1, I have a horizontal asymptote. Now remember, our graphs will not cross or touch our asymptotes, all right? Last thing you gotta do is create your graph. Same way we do any graph. Only thing with asymptotes, I'm gonna take 3 points to the left of my vertical asymptote, and I'm gonna take 3 points to the right of my vertical asymptote to be able to create my graph. So 3 points to the left would be -1, 0, and positive 1. 3 points to the right of my vertical asymptote will be at 3, 4, and 5. To be able to find my y values, I plug these x values into the equation, then I simplify. So I'm not going to do all of the points on the board just because I ran out of space, but I did write them down so I can give you the correct answers. First x value was -1, so I'll plug in -1 into this. So I have -1 plus 2 over x minus -1 minus 2. -1 plus 2 is positive 1. -1 minus 2 is -3. So this y value would be -1 over 3. If I plug in 0, I have 0 plus 2 over 0 minus 2. 0 plus 2 is equal to 2. 0 minus 2 is equal to negative 2. So this y value would be equal to negative 1. Again, I'm going to run out of space if I try to do all of these points. So to figure out the rest of your y values, plug your x values in, find your y values. I already did the problem on a separate sheet of paper, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in the y values. Make sure you use a calculator at home if you have one. So make sure you get the correct numbers. I already did those. And I can send you a picture of this if you want me to with the work as well. The y values for this problem were, for positive 1, you would get negative 3. For positive 3, you would get 5. Positive 4, you would get 3. And for 5, you would get 7 over 3, which is also equal to 2.3. So now you got to graph these out. So remember, when I create these graphs, I'm not going to cross or touch my asymptotes. So at negative 1, my y value is at negative 1/3, or this is equal to 0.33, negative 0.33. So at negative 1, 0.33, I have a point right here. At 0, I have a point at negative 1. At positive 1, the y value was negative 3. So this side of our graph looks similar to this. Notice, my line comes close to my asymptote but doesn't quite touch or cross it. Same thing happens when I go down. Goes down but doesn't cross or touch my asymptote. I need to do the same thing on the right side. So at positive 3, my y value is 5. So at 3, 5, got a point. My y value was 3 for 4, so at 4, 3, I got another point. The last point was at 5, at 5, 2.3, got another point that's somewhere in this ballpark. So last thing I would do is connect those dots. Again, my line will go close to my asymptote, but not quite touch those. So that was the first example. Again, we found our domain first, found the vertical asymptote, found the horizontal asymptote. We plot our asymptotes first, then we plug in points to be able to complete the graph. Now let's go over our second problem. Let's erase this. And we use the same steps. Only slight difference between this problem and the next problem is the degree of the problem, which changes our horizontal asymptote. We still found our vertical asymptote by making our domain equal, finding our domain by setting our denominator equal to 0. And this problem, this example, it was 1 over x minus 1. So again, we use the same steps. So in this problem, to find my domain, I take my denominator equal to 0. So I'll do x minus 1, set it equal to 0. If I add 1 to both sides, x is equal to positive 1, which means our domain tells us x cannot equal positive 1. We found our vertical asymptote the same way we found our domain. So our vertical asymptote is at positive 1. Next thing to do is find our horizontal asymptote. Now we pay attention to our degrees. Our degree is lower in our numerator than it is in our denominator, which means that our horizontal asymptote is at 0. Make sure you read through those emails so you can follow those rules. So now I found my domain, I found my vertical asymptote, I found my horizontal asymptote, which means now I can graph this out. Create my X and Y chart a little bit more over this time. So my vertical asymptote is at positive 1. So I got a dashed line that goes through positive 1. My horizontal asymptote is at 0. I'm not going to create a dashed line through my x-axis, but just know that your horizontal asymptote is at 0. So our graph's not going to cross or touch our x-axis. Now I just need to pick 3 points to the left and 3 points to the right of my vertical asymptote. 3 points to the left would be 0, -1, -2. I could also use like fractions or decimals to be able to get closer to this asymptote, but it's not necessary. I'm not just being too picky about the points. 3 points to the right will be 2, 3, and 4. And now I just plug and chuck these x values in and find my y value. So if I plug in x into this equation, 1 over 0 minus 1 is equal to -1. So my y value when I plug in 0 is 1, -1. If I plug in -1 into this, 1 over -1 minus 1 is equal to -1/2. If I plug in -2, 1 over -2 minus 1 is equal to -1/3. Now I got my 3 points to the left. I can go ahead and graph these. 0, -1 gets me to this point here. -1, -1/2. It's going to be in the middle of these in this value. So -1, -1/2, somewhere in this ballpark. And for -2, I had -1/3, which is -0.33. So it's going to get closer to our axis, but not quite on it. So I got 3 points to the left. Again, I could have used a fraction to get closer to my asymptote. Not necessary. Remember our horizontal asymptote was at 0. So our line isn't going to cross or touch that axis, but it will get extremely close to it. Next 3 points, if I plug in 2, 1 over 2 minus 1 is +1. If I plug in 3, 1 over 3 minus 1 is 1 over 2, so 1/2. If I plug in 4, 1 over 4 minus 1 is +1/3. I could change all these fractions into decimals. Doesn't really matter. So at +2, I had 2/1. At +3, I was at 3/1/2. So in the middle of this one. And for +4, I was at 1/3, which is close to our axis, but not quite. So again, when I draw this graph out, it's going to get close to the axis, but it's not going to touch our asymptote. And this is how you complete the example the second example. So if you got questions, please feel free to email me right away so I can help you out. I'm going to send you an additional problem for you to complete to send back to me today to confirm that you know what you're doing. All right.